My name is Benjamin Carter. Most folks just call me Ben. I'm 70 years old, and for the last 8 months, I've just been existing. When my wife Carol passed, the silence in our home was deafening. Last week, I finally went on that fishing trip I'd been putting off just to get away. I was supposed to be gone for a week, but when I came home 3 days early, I found my son Adam and his wife Megan standing in my bedroom, with a construction crew that was tearing my floorboards out. Megan just smiled that plastic smile of hers and said, "Oh, good you're back. We're just doing some renovations before we move in." They thought I was just a sad, clueless old man they could push aside. They didn't know I would soon find their secret files. They didn't know about the $150,000 in gambling debts Adam owed to a loan shark, or the $800,000 she had embezzled from her own company. And they definitely weren't expecting me to be the one smiling when the police knocked on their door. Before I continue this story, and believe me, the payoff is one you don't want to miss, please hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happened next. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? It does an old man's heart good to know where my friends are. The rain on the drive home was relentless, a real Michigan gusher. It hammered against the windshield of my old Ford F-150, the one Carol always said was too big for a retired carpenter. I was supposed to be enjoying the quiet up at Lake Michigan, just me and my fishing rod trying to forget the silence back home. I'd planned the whole week. But this storm, it wasn't just rain, it was a sign. The Weather Channel called it a once-in-a-decade event. So I packed up 3 days early. The house was too quiet. That's the real reason I went fishing. 8 months. 8 long months since Carol passed. The silence in this house. It was louder than any noise. It was the sound of her not being there. The sound of her coffee mug not clinking in the sink. The sound of her laughter not echoing from the den. I built this house. I physically built it 40 years ago. Drove every nail. Laid every piece of hardwood. It was my promise to her. A forever home, I'd called it. Now it just felt like an empty museum. I turned onto my street, my wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. And that's when my heart stopped. Right in my driveway, parked where I usually park my truck, was a white construction van. No logo. Mud splattered. My first thought was that a pipe burst. I hadn't called anyone. I'm a retired contractor. If anything breaks, I fix it myself. It's what I do. I parked behind the van, grabbed my bag, and hurried inside. "Hello," I called out. The smell of sawdust and drywall hit me instantly. It was wrong. Then I heard it. Not a drip, not a leak, a crash, the sound of a hammer, no a pry bar, coming from upstairs. It was coming from our room, my bedroom. I dropped my bag. I ran up the stairs, my 70-year-old knees screaming in protest. "Hey, what the hell is going on?" I reached the landing. The door to my bedroom, the solid oak door I'd hung myself, was gone. It was leaning against the hallway wall. I skidded to a stop in the doorway. I couldn't breathe. My room was gone. 2 men I'd never seen before were ripping the place apart. They had pry bars, and were tearing up the oak floorboards. The ones Carol and I picked out together. The ones I sanded and stained myself until they shined. All our furniture, our bed, Carol's antique vanity, the dresser I built for her as a wedding gift. All of it was shoved into the center of the room, covered in a dusty plastic drop cloth. The wedding photo we kept on the dresser, gone. And standing right in the middle of the destruction, holding a set of blueprints, was my son Adam. And next to him, his wife Megan. They were smiling, pointing at the wall where our bed used to be. They hadn't heard me over the noise. Megan was saying something about open concept and better flow. I roared. It wasn't a word, it was a sound from deep in my chest. "What are you doing?" The workers froze. Adam spun around, his face draining of all color. He looked like a teenager caught throwing a party. Megan. Megan just flinched. Just for a second. Then that smooth plastic smile I'd come to hate slid right back into place. Ben. Dad. You're back early, she chirped like she'd just found me in the kitchen making coffee. We weren't expecting you. The storm, I guess. Get them out, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. Get them out of my house, now! Dad, calm down. Adam started taking a step toward me, his hands up. We can explain. Explain what? I pointed at the floor. Explain why you're destroying my bedroom, why you're tearing up my wife's home. Megan stepped in front of Adam, placing a hand on his chest, silencing him. She was always the one in control. Ben, this is just a misunderstanding. You came back early. We were going to tell you, this is a good thing. I just stared at her. My mind couldn't connect the words she was saying with the scene in front of me. The dust, the broken wood, the violation. We're just doing some renovations, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Before we move in. My voice was low and final. I'm not going anywhere. Megan's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. The patient caring mask dissolved, and for a split second I saw the cold, hard woman Carol had warned me about. She looked at me, really looked at me, and her eyes were like ice chips. What did you say? She asked, her voice quiet, dangerous. I repeated, standing up a little straighter. I am not going anywhere. Now you tell these men to put my floor back and get the hell out of my house. I turned to the two workers who had stopped prying up the wood and were watching us uneasily. You heard me. Put your tools down. This is my house. You are trespassing. The larger of the two men glanced at Megan. She simply crossed her arms. Keep working, guys, she ordered, her voice clipped. We're paying you for the job, not to take a break. He's just confused. Confused, I roared. I am not confused. I am the owner of this property. I am telling you to leave. The workers looked at each other again, then back at Megan. She let out an exasperated sigh, pulled her checkbook from her purse and scribbled something. She tore the check out and waved it. Here, this is for the full day. Now keep working. Our contract is with me. He doesn't have the authority to stop you. I watched helpless as they shrugged and turned back to their destruction. The sound of the pry bar sinking into the next plank felt like a nail in my own coffin. She had seized control. In my own home, my word meant nothing against her checkbook. I couldn't stand to watch it. I couldn't stand to be in that room, our room, while they desecrated it. I turned and walked out. My shoulders slumped. I felt a lifetime of authority, of being the man of the house, evaporate in that single moment. I went downstairs, my hand gripping the banister I had carved. When I reached the living room, the violation was even worse. It wasn't just my bedroom. They had been busy everywhere. My entire life was in cardboard boxes. Carol's favorite armchair, the one with the worn velvet where she used to sit and read. Boxed. My collection of model trains, the ones I'd spent 30 years building, each one with its own story, shoved into crates. The lamps, the side tables, the books, all packed. And on the side of every single box, in thick black marker, Megan had written one word: Goodwill. Not storage. Not Dad's things. Goodwill. She was throwing my life, our life, into the trash. I ran my hand over a box. I could feel a model engine inside. I remembered 10 years ago, right in this room, Adam had come to me, white-faced, 29 years old and shaking. He'd gotten tangled in some can't-miss business venture. He owed $50,000. $50,000. I didn't have it in savings, not after paying for his college and that wedding. So I went to the bank. I mortgaged this house. The house I'd just finished paying off. I put my retirement on the line to save him from his own stupidity. I never told Carol the full extent of it. I just handled it, because that's what a father does. Dad. Adam's voice was weak. He had followed me downstairs. He stood in the middle of the living room, shuffling his feet, unable to look at the boxes. "She's throwing it all away, Adam," I whispered, pointing to a box. "Your mother's chair." "Dad, listen. We just want what's best for you," he stammered. "Megan, she found that place, and it's really nice, and we're in a bit of a tight spot right now. We're in, I mean," he was about to say it. I could see the confession right on the tip of his tongue. He was about to tell me the real reason. "Adam," Megan's voice snapped from the top of the stairs. It was sharp as a whip. "What are you doing? I told you to get the measurements for the new vanities." "I'm just talking to Dad," he said, shrinking. She descended the stairs slowly, her eyes fixed on me. "We're worried about your safety, Ben. That's all. Adam was just trying to say that we're under a lot of stress trying to take care of you. You're not making it easy." I looked at my son, a 40-year-old man, cowering before his wife. "Is there something you're not telling me, Adam? Something about this tight spot?" Adam opened his mouth, but Megan shot him a look that froze the words in his throat. She turned to me. "The only thing you need to know, Ben, is that the transport van from Golden Sunset will be here on Friday morning, 9 a.m. sharp." She walked to the front door and pulled it open, holding it for her husband. "Please, be ready. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be. For our sake." Adam wouldn't look at me. He just scurried past her and out the door. Megan gave me one last look. It wasn't concern. It wasn't sympathy. It was a cold, final assessment. Then she pulled the door shut, leaving me alone in the wreckage of my home. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. "Friday," I repeated the word, tasting like ash. "Friday, that's tomorrow. You can't just throw me out of my own home." Megan actually let out a small, sharp laugh. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Ben, we can. You really should sit down for this." "I'll stand," I said. My legs felt weak, but I'd be damned if I'd show it. "Adam, go get your father a glass of water," she commanded, not even looking at him. Adam practically sprinted to the kitchen, grateful for an escape. He was always grateful for an escape. Megan turned her full attention to me. The fake sympathy was gone, evaporated. In its place was a cold, hard efficiency, like a surgeon about to make an incision. "Ben, you really don't remember, do you?" she asked, her voice flat. My mind spun. Remember what the last 8 months had been a blur. A thick gray fog of grief. After the funeral, after everyone went home and the casseroles stopped coming. I was a ghost. I'd spent days sitting in Carol's armchair, the one now packed in a box marked Goodwill, just staring at the wall. I barely ate. I didn't sleep. The world was muffled like I was underwater. And Megan had been there. I saw her suddenly, as clearly as if it were yesterday. She'd come over about a month after Carol died. I was sitting at the kitchen table, unable to even make coffee. She'd brought soup and a stack of papers, a thick stack. "Ben," she'd said, her voice so soft, so full of concern. She'd put her hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard, but there's just some estate paperwork. Just formalities for Mom's accounts. Tax stuff. It'll make things simpler for you, so you just need to sign here, and initial here." Her pen was in my hand. My eyes couldn't focus on the fine print. It all looked like legal nonsense. Tax stuff. Simpler. I just wanted her to leave so I could go back to being alone. So I signed. I signed everything she put in front of me. I signed my life away just to make the moment stop. What? What papers?" I whispered, my voice hoarse, already knowing the answer. The quitclaim deed, Megan said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. You agreed to transfer ownership of the house to Adam. It simplified things for your eventual estate. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I grabbed the back of Carol's chair, the box, holding it to keep my balance. You tricked me. Tricked you. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. That's a strong word. You lied to me. I gasped, the air thin in my lungs. You told me it was about Carol's accounts. About taxes. I was grieving. I didn't know what I was signing. She stepped closer, and for the first time I could smell her perfume. Expensive. The kind I'd probably paid for. I told you it would make things simpler, she said, her voice dropping to a low, confidential tone. And it has, for us. Adam came back from the kitchen holding the glass of water. He saw the look on my face and stopped frozen. What's going on? Your father, Megan said, not taking her eyes off me, is just now realizing that this isn't his house anymore. Adam, I pleaded, looking at my son. You knew this. You let her do this. Adam's face crumpled. Dad, it's... Megan handled the paperwork. I thought it was just for taxes, too. At first... Shut up, Adam, Megan snapped. Don't be weak. She turned back to me, her face a mask of bored impatience. Look, it's done. Your signature is on a notarized, legally filed document. It's been on file with the county for 6 months. It's ironclad. You gave us the house. I'll fight it, I stammered, my mind racing. I'll get a lawyer. I'll tell them you committed fraud, that you took advantage of me. Megan actually smiled. A real, genuine smile, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. And what evidence do you have, Ben? You, a grieving old man, suddenly changed your mind after giving your son his inheritance early. That's what it looks like. Who will they believe, me, the concerned daughter-in-law trying to get her confused father-in-law into a safe facility, or you? She tapped her temple. You've been forgetful lately. You told me you couldn't find your keys just last week. You forgot to take out the trash on Tuesday. It's all signs of decline. She had been building a case. Every minor slip, every moment of grief-stricken fog, she had been collecting them like ammunition. So, she said, walking to the front door and picking up her purse, here are your options. You can be ready for the Golden Sunset van at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and you can go quietly. Or, you can make a scene. You can refuse. And I will call the police. I will show them the deed to my house, and I will have you forcibly removed for trespassing. She opened the door. Either way, Ben, you're leaving. You have 24 hours to decide if you're leaving on your feet or in handcuffs. The choice is yours. She walked out. Adam stood there for a second, trembling, his face pale. Dad, I'm sorry. Then he turned and ran out the door after her. The door clicked shut. The sound was so final. I stood there in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my life packed away in cardboard tombs. Goodwill. She was throwing my memories away. I listened as their car engine started. Adam's new Audi, the one I co-signed the loan for because his credit was shot. The engine faded down the street, and then silence. The same crushing, absolute silence that had haunted this house since Carol died. But this was different. This wasn't grief. This was violation. I sank down onto the bottom step of the staircase, my back against the hard wood. The smell of sawdust and ripped-up oak filled my lungs. I looked at the box marked Goodwill that held Carol's reading chair. You were right, Carol, I whispered to the empty room. You were right about everything. I remembered her standing right here in this hallway just after Adam announced his engagement. She was wringing her hands, a thing she only did when she was deeply troubled. Ben, I don't trust her, she'd said. There's something hard in her eyes. She doesn't look at Adam, she looks through him. At us. At this house, at your wallet. He loves her, honey, I'd said, putting my arm around her. That's all that matters. What a fool I'd been. A sentimental 70-year-old fool. All my life I'd worked with my hands. I built things that were solid things you could trust. I thought my son was one of them. I thought my family was solid. But it was all just a facade, and Megan had just taken a sledgehammer to it. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was rage. A cold, deep rage that was settling into my bones. I had to talk to Adam. He was my son. He couldn't let this happen. He was just scared of her. He was weak, but he wasn't evil. Was he? I hit his name on the screen. The phone rang once, then a click. Straight to voicemail. Hey, this is Adam. Leave a message. He'd sent me to voicemail. He was sitting in the car right next to her, and he'd silenced my call. Adam, I said into the phone, my voice cracking. Adam, you pick up this phone. You can't let her do this. This is our home, son. This is your mother's home. Don't do this to her. Don't do this to me. I hung up, my heart hammering. He'll call back. He has to. He's my boy. I stared at the phone. Nothing. My fingers trembled as I scrolled to Megan's name. I didn't want to call her. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. But what choice did I have? I hit the call button. A single beep followed by an automated voice. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time. Not a voicemail. A block. She had already blocked my number. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I didn't have 24 hours. I had nothing. I was a prisoner in my own home, and the warden had just left, promising to send the executioner in the morning. I was 70 years old. My wife was gone. My son had abandoned me, and I was about to be homeless. My savings were depleted from paying for their lives. My Social Security check wouldn't even cover the rent on a one-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood, let alone the golden sunset shoebox they'd picked out for me. I sat there on the stairs for hours. The sun went down. The house grew cold. The rain lashed against the windows. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't move. I just sat in the dark in the ruins of the life I had built. I felt the hunger in my stomach, the ache in my back. And for the first time since Carol died, I cried. Not the hot, wet tears of grief. These were cold, angry tears, tears of utter, profound betrayal. No, the word formed in my throat. No. I am not going to let them win. I am not going to go quietly to that box. I am not going to let them sell Carol's house and spend the money on expensive cars and vacations. I built this place. I bled for this place. If they want a fight, I'll give them one. I may be old. I may be grieving. But I am not stupid. And I am not weak. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my flannel shirt. I stood up, my knees cracking in protest. I looked at the packed-up, violated room. They made a mistake. They underestimated me. They saw a sad old man. They forgot I was the man who built the walls that were still standing around them. I knew I had one call left to make. One person who knew every dime I'd ever earned and every dime I'd ever spent. One person who hated Megan Carter almost as much as Carol did. I picked up my phone. I needed to find Jean Haas, my accountant. I woke up with a sharp pain in my neck. Sometime in the cold, dark hours, I must have moved from the stairs to the one piece of furniture left uncovered. Carol's armchair. The one in the living room now packed in a box marked for Goodwill. No, I was on the other one, the old leather recliner in my den, the one they hadn't gotten to yet. My body ached. It was morning. Thursday morning. The rain had stopped, but the gray light filtering through the windows looked cold. 9 a.m. tomorrow. The van from Golden Sunset was coming. I had less than 24 hours. I pushed myself up my joints, screaming. I had to find something. A document. A loophole. Anything. I stumbled into my small home office, the room where I used to run my contracting business. It was ransacked. Not violently, but meticulously. Megan. This had her fingerprints all over it. My file cabinet was open. The folders were still there, neatly labeled. Taxes 2020. House insurance, utilities. But the important ones, deeds, mortgage documents, investment accounts, they were empty. Just hollow cardboard shells. She had taken every financial document I owned. She was thorough. She'd been planning this for months, while she was bringing me soup, patting my hand, telling me to take my time grieving. She was gutting my life piece by piece. She knew exactly what I owned, what I was worth, and now she had the signature to take it all. I sat in my old desk chair, the one with the squeak Carol always complained about, and I felt that cold, heavy despair settle over me again. It was hopeless. She had the documents. She had the law on her side. I was just a forgetful old man, just like she'd planned. But as I sat there staring at the empty folders, a thought kept scratching at the back of my mind. A detail that didn't fit. Why the rush? Why now? Even if they had the house, why tear it apart today? Why give me a 24-hour eviction notice? Selling a house, even in a good market, takes weeks, months. You have to list it, show it. Why destroy the floors if you're just going to sell it? You'd want it to look good for potential buyers. Why tear it apart like a pack of wolves frantic to get to the marrow? It didn't make sense unless I said the words out loud to the empty room. Unless they're not planning to sell it. The thought hit me like a splash of ice water. You don't renovate a house you're about to sell. You renovate a house you're about to... What unless they need cash? I whispered. Right now. You don't get cash from a normal sale in 24 hours. But you can get cash if you take out a loan against the property. A hard money loan. The kind you get from lenders who don't ask too many questions as long as the collateral is solid. And my house, fully paid off until I'd mortgaged it for Adam, was solid gold. My mind flashed back to the moment on the stairs, Adam's panicked face. Dad, we're in a bit of a tight spot. And Megan's voice cutting him off. Shut up, Adam. He hadn't been about to say they were worried about me. He was about to confess. We're in debt. That's what he was going to say. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. They weren't just planning for their future. They were running from their present. This wasn't just an inheritance grab. This was a shakedown. And suddenly I wasn't just a victim. I was a man with a question. And that one question gave me a sliver of hope. If they were desperate, they were sloppy. If they were sloppy, they left tracks. I didn't know anything about computers or high finance. Megan had handled all of that. But I knew numbers. And I knew the one man who knew my numbers better than anyone. The man who had managed my books for 30 years. The man who had repeatedly warned me about Adam's spending. The man who, when I'd insisted on paying for that ridiculous wedding, had just looked at me over his glasses and said, It's your funeral, Ben, but don't say I didn't tell you. Gene Haas, my old accountant. I grabbed my keys. I still had my truck. They hadn't taken that yet. I wasn't going to Golden Sunset. I was going to see Gene. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. They hadn't taken those yet. My old F-150 was still in the drive, blocked in by the construction van, but the keys felt solid in my hand. A piece of my life they hadn't packed away. I squeezed them tight. I walked out the front door past the spot where Carol's roses used to be, before Megan complained they were too high maintenance and had Adam rip them out last fall. I should have seen it then. I should have put my foot down. But I was tired and Carol was sick, and it just seemed like a fight not worth having. I realized now all those little fights, they were the only fights worth having. I got into the truck. The cab smelled like me old coffee sawdust and a faint hint of fish from the tackle box in the back. It was a good smell, an honest smell. I had to wedge the truck around the construction van driving onto the lawn I'd spent 40 years keeping neat. The tires spun in the mud, leaving deep ruts. Good. Let them fix it. Gene Haas's office wasn't downtown in some glass tower. It was in a small brick building on the edge of the old business district, right where it had been for 35 years. Haas Accounting, no problem too small. Gene was old school. He still used a ledger for his own books, even though he ran everything on computers for his clients. He was 70 just like me. We'd grown old together, him counting my money, me fixing his plumbing. He was the only person I trusted. I pushed open the door. The little bell on top tinkled just like it had since 1985. The office was cluttered, warm, and smelled like pipe tobacco and strong coffee. Gene looked up from behind a mountain of paperwork, his thick glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Ben," he said, squinting. "What on earth are you doing here? I thought you were up at the lake terrifying the walleye." I must have looked a sight. I hadn't shaved. I'd slept in my clothes. I probably looked like the confused old man Megan was so keen on describing. I closed the door, my hand shaking just a little. "Gene," I said, my voice rough. "I'm in trouble. Real trouble." The surprise on his face vanished, replaced by the sharp, focused look of a man who spent his life finding problems in columns of numbers. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the old wooden chair opposite his desk. "Tell me." So I did. I told him everything. I told him about the storm, about coming home early, about the white van, about the men tearing up my bedroom floor. I told him about the Goodwill boxes and the glossy brochure for Golden Sunset. And then, the words catching in my throat, I told him about the quitclaim deed, the papers I'd signed blind with grief while my wife's body was barely cold in the ground. For a full minute, Gene just stared at me. He didn't speak. He just slowly took off his glasses and started polishing them, a sign he was furious. That girl," he finally said, his voice low. "That Megan. Carol hated her. She told my wife, you know. She said, 'Gene's wife, I'm telling you, she's a viper.' I always thought, I thought Carol was just being a protective mother. But this..." He put his glasses back on and swiveled to his computer. "This is beyond a viper. This is evil, Ben." His fingers flew across the keyboard. Clicks and clacks filled the room. County Register of Deeds. Carter Benjamin. Carter Adam. He was silent for another long minute, just reading. The silence stretched, and my hope, the little sliver I'd walked in with, started to die. "Well?" I finally asked. He swiveled back, his face grim. "Ben, they did it. It's legal. It's clean. 6 months ago. A quitclaim deed filed and recorded. Your signature notarized. It's their house. On paper, you're a guest, a tenant. You have no rights." The words hit me. So that's it," I said, my voice hollow. "I'm homeless. They win." "No," Gene said, his voice sharp. He leaned forward. "They don't win. You're right, they have the house. But you and I, we know why." He pointed a gnarled finger at me. "You just confirmed your own gut feeling. Desperation. Why the rush, Ben? Why rip up a house they just got? Why evict you with 24 hours notice?" I said they need cash," I replied. "Exactly." Gene slammed his hand on the desk, making the paperwork jump. "That girl, Megan, she's always spent money like it was on fire. The clothes, the cars, that ridiculous apartment. Adam doesn't make that kind of money, not from the job you got him. And you've been draining your retirement to prop them up for years. I've seen the statements. The well is dry, Ben. Your well. And now they're desperate. They're not just greedy. They're in a hole. A deep one. He was right. It wasn't just a plan. It was a panic. So what do we do? Gene steepled his fingers, looking at me over his glasses. We find the hole. We find out who they owe. We find out why they're so desperate. Because Ben, desperate people, they don't just get sloppy. They get stupid. He was right. And I had a sudden, sharp memory. A memory of my son 5 years ago wanting to start his own consulting business. A memory of me setting up his computer. Gene, I said, leaning in, I think I know where they might have gotten stupid. I stared at him. Debt. You think that's what this is? Gene leaned back in his squeaky chair and polished his glasses on the end of his tie. Ben, I've been doing this for 45 years. People do polite, normal things when they're greedy. They do crazy things when they're desperate. Tearing up a house they just acquired, evicting their own father with 24 hours' notice. That is not greed. That is panic. He was right. The word echoed in my head. Panic. It matched the look in Adam's eyes. It matched the frantic, sloppy way they had packed my life into boxes. But how do we find out? I asked. My voice felt hollow. She took everything, Gene. All my files. My bank statements, the mortgage papers. My office is... it's empty. She cleaned me out. She cleaned you out, Gene said, pointing a gnarled finger at me. She took your papers. But they're young Ben. They're arrogant. And they're sloppy. They must have their own paper trail. Bank accounts. Credit cards. Did you ever co-sign anything for them? The Audi, I mumbled. I co-signed the loan for that ridiculous car she drives. And his college loans. But that was years ago. No, something recent, Gene muttered, already typing, searching for something. They wouldn't be this desperate over a car payment. This is big. This is lose-your-legs kind of trouble. Think, Ben. Did you ever have access to their, I don't know, their computers, their emails? I shook my head. Megan guards her laptop like it's a block of gold. And Adam just does what she tells him. I leaned my head back, the exhaustion of the last 24 hours hitting me like a physical blow. I thought about Adam, my son, so weak, always looking for the easy way out, the shortcut. He'd never been smart with... Wait. A memory sharp and clear cut through the fog of my grief. It was about 5 years ago. Adam had come to me all excited about his new consulting business. Another one of his get-rich-quick schemes. He didn't know the first thing about technology. He'd bought a new laptop and couldn't even figure out how to set up his email. Gene, I said, sitting up straight. I think I might have a key. Gene stopped typing. A key to what? The house? They've probably already changed the locks. No, I said, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat. A key to everything. His cloud account. The online storage where he keeps his files. Gene just stared at me. You're kidding. He kept forgetting the password. I explained, the memory coming back faster now. He'd call me twice a week, frustrated, locked out of his own files. He's not smart enough to remember a complex password, and Megan, she treats him like an idiot. She probably doesn't even know he has it. He was too embarrassed to ask her for help, so he asked me. So you know his password? Gene asked, leaning in. No. I said, a slow smile spreading across my face for the first time in 8 months. Better. I set up the password recovery for him, and he was so afraid of Megan seeing his business failures, he didn't want the reset link going to their shared email. Gene's eyes widened. Ben, don't you dare tell me. I set the recovery email. I said, feeling a jolt of pure adrenaline, to an old junk mail account of mine, one I haven't checked in years. I bet my life, I bet my house. He never changed it. Jean's face split into a grin. It was a terrifying, beautiful sight. "Ben Carter, you magnificent old fox," he whispered. "You're still a builder, aren't you? Always leaving a back door." He spun his keyboard around so it faced me. The screen glowed. "What's the email, Ben? Log in. Now." My hands were shaking. Not from rage this time. Not from grief. From adrenaline. I typed in the old forgotten email address. I typed in the password I hadn't used in a decade. The inbox loaded. Junk. Junk. Ads for products I'd never buy. "Okay," I said to Jean. "I'm in." "Good," he said, his voice low and steady. "Now open a new tab. Go to the cloud service login page. Type in Adam's email address and click Forgot Password." I did it. I clicked the button. We both stared at the screen, holding our breath. The seconds stretched out. 1, 2, 3, ping. A new email appeared at the top of my junk mail inbox. The subject line read, "Your password reset link." Jean and I looked at each other. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was pure, cold focus. "We're in, Ben," he said. "Let's go find the hole." I stared at the screen. That single line of text, "Your password reset link," felt like a physical key placed in my hand. Jean leaned in so close I could smell the faint scent of pipe tobacco on his sweater. "Well," he breathed, "don't just stare at it, Ben. Click the link." My hand, calloused from 40 years of holding a hammer, was shaking as I moved the mouse. I clicked. A new screen opened. "Create new password." "What do I make it?" I asked, my mind blank. Jean chuckled a dry, raspy sound. "Try Carol was right. All caps." I almost smiled. Instead, I typed in "Foolish Old Man 1." I hit enter. The screen refreshed. "Your password has been reset." And just like that, we were in. It was a mess. A digital hurricane. Adam's entire life was dumped into this drive without any thought or organization. Hundreds of files, most of them with names like untitled_document_1 or new_spreadsheet_final_final_2. It was exactly how he lived his life, sloppy, chaotic, and with no attention to detail. "Where do we even start?" I mumbled, scrolling through the sea of icons. I saw folders labeled Vacation Pics, Cabo, and BMW Lease. I felt a flash of anger. My money. All of it. My money. "Look for what doesn't fit," Jean said, his accountant's mind cutting through the clutter. "Forget the personal stuff. Look for business. Look for finance. Look for anything that looks scared." I kept scrolling. Business ideas 2023. Marketing plan. Client outreach. All of it looked pathetic, half-finished. This was the consulting business I'd helped him set up. It was a joke. All his life it was one scheme after another. The real estate seminar, the vitamin company, the app he was going to design. Every single one ended with him coming to me, hat in hand. "Dad, I just need a little float, just to get me through this rough patch." And I, like a fool, always provided it. "Wait," Jean said, pointing a gnarled finger at the screen. "Right there. That folder." It was different from the others. It wasn't a bland blue folder icon. It was marked with a red exclamation point. The name wasn't business. It was just one word, urgent. My blood went cold. This was it. This was the hole. I moved the mouse. I clicked. The folder opened. It wasn't half-finished business plans. It was screenshots. Dozens of them. Pages from online casinos, sports betting sites, blackjack tables, and columns of numbers, red numbers, losses. "Oh, son," I whispered. The numbers were staggering. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. It was a river of debt. "He's not just a bad businessman, Ben," Gene said, his voice grim. "He's an addict. He's been gambling. But this is crazy money. Where did he get it?" "He didn't," Gene said, scrolling faster. "He lost it, which means he owes it. Look for the emails, Ben. Look for the money trail." We clicked out of the screenshots and found a subfolder. Correspondence. The first few were automated messages from the gambling sites. "Your account is overdrawn. Deposit needed to continue play." But then we found the other ones. The ones not from a .com address. The ones from a simple, anonymous email provider. The sender's name was just Mr. T. The first email from 6 weeks ago was almost polite. "Adam, payment is late. Let's resolve this." The next 2 weeks later was firmer. "Adam, my patience is wearing thin. You know the terms." Then one from last week. "Adam, you are making a mistake. I know where you live. I know about your pretty wife. I know about your old man." My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt sick. And then we saw the last one. The one sent 2 days ago. Tuesday, the day before I came home. I clicked it open. The text was short and brutal. "Adam, no more games. You have until 5 p.m. Friday, $150,000. Cash, not a check, not a transfer. Cash. Or I am coming to your house. I will talk to Megan, and then I will go visit your clueless old man at his nice quiet house on Willow Creek Drive. I will get my money, or I will take it out of your family piece by piece. 5 p.m. Friday. Friday. Tomorrow." Gene and I just stared at the screen. The entire plan, the entire horrific, desperate puzzle snapped into place. The 9 a.m. eviction, the frantic destruction. They weren't just trying to sell the house. They were using my signed-away deed as collateral for a hard money loan. The kind of loan a shark gives you in 24 hours. They needed to get me out, declare me confused, and have possession of the house before the lender's appraiser showed up tomorrow. They needed that $150,000 in cash before 5 p.m. They weren't just trying to put me in a home. They were sacrificing me to save their own skins from a loan shark. "Gene," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "He's not just a fool. He's put a target on my back." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the threat on the screen. "I know where your old man lives." He wasn't just threatening Adam. He was threatening me. My son hadn't just been stupid. He'd been reckless. He had painted a target on my back, on my home, on the life I had left. "They're going to sacrifice me, Gene." I whispered the words, tasting like poison. "They're going to hand over the house, my house, to get this monster off their backs. They'll get me locked up in that Golden Sunset place, take out a loan, pay this Mr. T, and what?" Gene was already shaking his head, his face pale. $150,000. "Ben, that's a lot of money. But," he stopped, his mind clearly working, the gears turning. "But is it destroy your father and steal his house money? Is it risk a fraud charge money?" I looked at him confused. "What are you talking about? It's a loan shark. They're terrified." "Adam is terrified," Gene corrected, his voice hardening. "Adam is a weak-willed fool who would do anything to save his own skin. But Megan—" He shook his head again, more firmly this time. "No. That woman is cold, Ben. She's a calculator. She wouldn't orchestrate this just to pay off her husband's stupid gambling debts. She would cut him loose first." He was right. As much as I hated to admit it, it didn't track. Megan despised Adam's weakness. She wouldn't risk her own future, her reputation, her comfortable life just to save him from a mess he made. She would have thrown him to the wolves. So, I said, my mind struggling to keep up. What does that mean? It means, Jean said, turning back to the glowing screen, that Adam's debt isn't the reason. It's the complication. It's the deadline. Megan was already planning something, and Adam's stupid mistake just accelerated her timeline. Jean's eyes scanned the file list again. Forget urgent. That's Adam's panic folder. We need to find her folder, the one a calculator would keep. We scrolled past the vacation photos, past the car leases, and then we saw it. It wasn't marked with a red exclamation point. It was simple, understated, hidden in plain sight. A single folder named M. M for Megan, Jean whispered. He clicked it. Unlike Adam's chaotic mess, this folder was organized. Subfolders neatly labeled. Invoices, receipts, travel, and one named holding account. What's holding account? I asked. Jean's face was ashen. That's a term people use when they're hiding something. Open it. I clicked. It wasn't filled with screenshots. It was filled with scanned bank statements, PDFs, dozens of them. But the bank wasn't a local one. It wasn't Chase or Bank of America. The logo was for a bank in the Cayman Islands. Oh my God, Jean breathed. Ben, she's not just in debt. She's a thief. My heart hammered. What is that? She's an embezzler, Jean said, his voice a low, furious growl. He started opening the statements one after another, his eyes flying across the columns of numbers. She's been skimming Ben from her company, the tech firm where she's the finance manager. She's been wiring money, small amounts at first, 5,000, then 10, then 50. He opened the most recent statement from last week. His finger traced the final balance at the bottom of the page. He didn't say anything. He just swiveled the monitor so I could see it for myself. I read the number, and I read it again. It wasn't $150,000. It was $842,000. And change. She stole almost $1 million, I stammered. And she was getting ready to run Ben, Jean said, clicking back to another file in her folder. It was a scanned email, an internal memo from her company's CEO. Subject, mandatory external audit. The memo was clear. A surprise audit was scheduled for next Monday. The whole plan laid itself bare. Megan was a thief. She knew the auditors were coming on Monday. She was planning to run to disappear with her stolen money this weekend. And then Adam's loan shark gave them a Friday deadline. The $150,000 debt wasn't the main problem. It was just a final messy complication before she could execute her grand escape. She wasn't just stealing my house. I said the full horrific truth, finally landing on me. She and Adam, they were going to pay the shark, take her stolen money, and disappear. They were going to leave me. They were going to leave me to rot in that home while they ran off with nearly $1 million. I was stunned. $150,000. What on earth did he do? Jean shook his head, his face a mixture of pity and disgust. Your son is a fool, Ben. A weak, predictable fool. But I still don't get it. Megan, that woman is smart. Cold, but smart. She wouldn't risk her entire life, this beautiful, expensive life you paid for, just to cover his gambling debts. She'd sooner cut him loose and let the loan sharks have him. He was right. Jean was always right about people. Megan had nothing but contempt for Adam's weakness. I'd seen it 100 times at dinner, the way her eyes would narrow when he told a stupid joke, the way she'd cut him off. She wouldn't risk her future for him. Not unless she had her own problems, I said, the thought forming as I spoke it. Unless this $150,000 mess isn't the main fire. What if it's just a distraction? We turned back to the cloud drive, back to the list of folders. I scrolled past Urgent, which was Adam's panic folder. I looked for something else, something like her. And there it was. Not marked with a red warning, not shouting, just simple, quiet. Hidden in plain sight, a single folder named M. M for Megan, Jean whispered, leaning in. I clicked it. Unlike Adam's digital chaos, this folder was meticulous. It was organized, subfolders neatly labeled, invoices, receipts, travel, and one folder named holding account. What's a holding account? I asked. Jean's face went pale. That's a term people use when they're hiding something, Ben. When they're washing money. Open it. My hand was shaking as I moved the mouse. I clicked. It wasn't screenshots of gambling sites. It was scanned documents, bank statements, dozens of them. The logo on the top wasn't Chase. It wasn't Bank of America. It was a bank I'd never heard of, a bank in the Cayman Islands. And the account name wasn't Adam and Megan Carter. It was M. Carter Holdings S.A. LLC. Oh my God, Jean breathed. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the screen, his eyes wide behind his thick glasses. Ben, she's not just in debt. She's a thief. What? What is that? My throat was dry. She's an embezzler, Jean said, his voice a low, furious growl. He started opening the statements one after another, his eyes flying across the columns of numbers. He was a human calculator, his mind processing the figures faster than I could even read them. She's been skimming Ben from her company, that tech firm where she's the finance manager. She's been wiring money, small amounts at first, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Then, oh Lord, then it got bigger. He opened the most recent statement. It was from last week. His gnarled finger traced the final balance at the bottom of the page. He didn't say anything. He just swiveled the monitor so I could see it for myself. I leaned in, my old eyes struggling to focus. I read the number, and I read it again. It wasn't $150,000. It was $842,000 and 38 cents. She stole almost $1 million, I stammered. And she was getting ready to run Ben, Jean said, clicking back to another file in her M folder. This one was a scanned email, an internal memo from her company's CEO. The subject line was clear: mandatory external audit. The memo was dated last Monday. It announced a surprise comprehensive audit of all financial departments, scheduled to begin next Monday. The whole plan, the whole horrific, desperate plan laid itself bare in that dusty office. Megan was a thief. She knew the auditors were coming on Monday. She was planning to run to disappear with her stolen money this weekend. And then, Adam's loan shark gave them a Friday deadline. The $150,000 debt wasn't the main problem. It was just a final messy complication before she could execute her grand escape. She wasn't just stealing my house, I said, the full horrific truth finally landing on me. She and Adam, they were going to pay the shark with a loan on my house, take her stolen money, and disappear. Together. They were going to leave me. They were going to leave me to rot in that home, while they ran off with nearly $1 million. I couldn't breathe. The air in Jean's dusty office felt too thick to inhale. Adam's debt. It was just a sideshow, a nuisance. It was just the gravel in the road that threatened to pop her getaway tires. Look here, Jean said, his voice a low growl. He clicked on the M folder again, and then on a subfolder. The name was simple. Escape plan. Escape plan. My own daughter-in-law had an escape plan. Was she planning to leave Adam, take the money, and leave him to deal with the loan shark and me and the destroyed house? Or was she planning to take him with her? We read the documents, and it was all there, laid out in cold, calculating detail. Megan, the finance manager, knew her company was scheduling a surprise external audit. She'd been tipped off. There was an email from an internal source, mandatory audit, Monday a.m. They're looking deep. That email was from last week. Monday. This coming Monday. Her original plan, it seemed, was to quietly liquidate the Cayman account on Friday, pack her bags, and be on a flight to a non-extradition country by Sunday. Leave Adam to face the music with his loan shark. Leave me to, well, she probably hadn't even thought about me. But then, Adam's stupidity had ruined her timeline. The loan shark's threat. 5 p.m. Friday. Tomorrow. They wouldn't let Adam or her leave the country if he still owed that money. So the plan had changed. Jean and I pieced it together from the notes and the emails to a hard money lender. The new plan was frantic, desperate. Step 1, get me Ben, the confused, grieving old man, out of the house. Use the phony Golden Sunset reservation. Have me declared incompetent, or at the very least, removed. That was today. Thursday. Step 2, with me gone, use the deed I'd foolishly signed over to secure an emergency one-day loan on the house. $150,000. They had a lender lined up, one who didn't ask questions as long as the title was clean. They'd get the cash by tomorrow afternoon, Friday. Step 3, pay the loan shark. Get him off their backs. Step 4, on Sunday, proceed with the original plan. Megan would drain the $800,000 from the Cayman account. Step 5, they would both get on a plane Sunday night and disappear together. Before the auditors walked into her office on Monday morning, I leaned back in the chair. The springs squeaked a pathetic sound in the heavy silence. "They're criminals," I whispered. It wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just greed. This was a conspiracy. They weren't just tricking me. They weren't just stealing my house. They were going to pay off a gangster with my life's work, and then flee the country with stolen money, leaving me to rot in that nursing home, erased, wiped off the books, a loose end neatly tied up. The sun hadn't even started to hint at the horizon. It was still that deep, dark blue-gray of early morning. The only light in Jean's office was the pale, sickly glow of the computer monitor reflecting off our tired, pale faces. The grief that had fogged my mind for 8 long months. It was gone. It felt like it had burned away in the night, leaving something hard and cold and heavy in its place. It was rage, but it was a different kind of rage than I'd ever felt. It wasn't hot. It wasn't loud. It was a focused, quiet carpenter's rage. The kind of rage you use when you find a warp in a piece of prime oak. You don't yell at it. You just get your tools and you make it straight no matter how much force it takes. I stood up from the creaking chair. My back was stiff from leaning over the screen all night, but my mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in almost a year. "Jean," I said. My voice sounded different in the quiet room. It didn't tremble. It was flat. "Print it. Print every last page." Jean looked up, his eyes bloodshot behind his thick glasses. "Ben, what?" "Print everything," I repeated, and this time my voice was harder. 2 copies of every file, every single bank statement from that Cayman account, every screenshot of Adam's gambling losses, and especially, print every single word of that loan shark's threats. The printer in the corner whirred to life, a comforting mechanical sound in the stillness. It started spitting out pages one by one, the evidence of their betrayal. Jean swiveled in his chair, his old knees cracking. "Ben, what are you going to do?" I walked to the office window, looking down at the dark, empty street. Main Street. My town. I'm getting my house back, Jean, I said, watching the first sleepy delivery truck roll by. The house Carol loved, the house I built, and then I'm going to make sure those two, they never ever get the chance to do this to anyone else again. I could almost hear Carol's voice in my ear, that sharp, loving practicality she always had. She was always telling me I was too soft, especially when it came to Adam. He needs a firm hand, Ben, she used to say, sitting right at our kitchen table. Not an open wallet. You need to be tough. You need to let him face his own consequences. I'd always argued with her. I'd always made excuses for him. He's just finding his way, honey, I'd say. He's got a good heart. Now looking at the printer spitting out page after page of his weakness and her venom, I finally understood. Okay, Carol, I whispered to the dark window. I'll be tough now, I promise. I won't let them destroy your legacy. I turned back to the desk. I pulled out my phone. My first instinct, the instinct of a 70-year-old man who trusted the system, was to call 911, to report the crime. But I stopped. My thumb hovered over the screen. This wasn't a simple break-in. This was complex. This was high-level fraud embezzlement conspiracy. This needed someone who understood how to cut through the legal nonsense. This needed someone who could fight her on her own turf. I scrolled past 911. I scrolled past the names of my neighbors. I went to Russo. Mr. Russo. He wasn't a friend. He was a bulldog. A tough old-school lawyer who specialized in civil litigation and corporate fraud. He'd helped me with a few contracts on a commercial build 20 years ago. The man had terrified me. He was perfect. I hit the call button. The screen glowed. 5:45 a.m. I didn't care. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up thinking maybe even bulldogs slept. Then the line clicked. What? It wasn't a question. It was a demand barked into the phone. Russo, I said, my voice steady. It's Ben Carter, from the old lumberyard build. There was a pause, a heavy, sleepy sigh. Carter, it's almost 6 o'clock in the morning. Is your house on fire? In a way, I said. I'm sorry to call this early. I need you at Gene Haas's office on Main Street, immediately. Are you kidding me, Carter? He growled. I'm in bed. Whatever it is, it can wait until 9. Send my secretary an email. He was about to hang up. I could feel it. I have undeniable, documented proof, I said, speaking quickly, the words sharp and precise, that I was defrauded of my home 6 months ago while I was grieving my wife. I also have proof, hard digital proof, that my daughter-in-law, a finance manager at Tech Solutions, has embezzled $842,000 into an offshore account. And I have evidence that she and my son are planning to flee the country this Sunday, right before an audit on Monday. Oh, and they're also mixed up with a loan shark who's threatening my life. I took a breath. So, are you interested, or should I call someone else? The silence on the other end was absolute. I heard the sound of sheets rustling, the unmistakable sound of bare feet hitting a hardwood floor. Mr. Carter? Russo's voice was suddenly wide awake. It was sharp. It was hungry. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. Don't touch another thing. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Jean looked at me, raising a single bushy eyebrow. Russo? I nodded. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Good, Jean said, pulling another stack of papers from the printer. He handed the top page to me. It was the email from Mr. T. Because you're going to need him, Ben. They didn't just take your house, they put your life on the line. Russo arrived in 19 minutes. He didn't look like a man who had been woken up at dawn. He looked like he'd been ironed. His suit was perfect, his tie was straight. He walked into Jean's office, shook my hand firmly, nodded at Jean, and said, "Show me." For the next 10 minutes, there was no sound, but the shuffling of paper as Russo read. He scanned the quitclaim deed. He scanned the loan shark's emails. He scanned the Cayman Islands bank statements, his eyes moving fast, absorbing the numbers. He looked at the internal audit memo, the one scheduling the review for Monday. When he was done, he stacked the papers neatly on Jean's desk. He didn't look angry. He looked impressed. "Mr. Carter, Ben, this is..." He paused, searching for the word. "This is an explosion. This is one of the cleanest cases of multi-layered fraud I've ever seen." "So," I said, my voice hoarse. "What do we do? I want my house back, Russo, and I want them punished." "Oh, we'll get the house back," Russo said almost dismissively. "The civil case is a slam dunk. We'll file an emergency injunction. We argue you were defrauded, undue influence, signing under duress of grief. And we show the judge this..." He tapped the embezzlement files to prove their criminal intent. "No judge in the state will side with them. The house is yours, Ben. That's the easy part." I looked at the bank statement on the top of the pile. The one showing $842,000. All the years I'd scrimped. All the vacations I'd told Carol we couldn't afford. Driving my truck for 15 years because it still ran good. All that sacrifice just so my son could marry a thief who stole more in 2 years than I'd saved in 20. Jean must have read my mind. He broke the silence. "Ben Russo, we have to move fast. Today is Thursday. That loan shark wants his money by 5 p.m. Potero. And if that audit is Monday, if Megan gets even a hint that we're on to her, she'll be on a plane by noon. That $800,000 will be gone. Forever." Russo nodded. "Jean's right. The company, Tech Solutions, they're the primary victim here. We have to notify them." I grabbed the stack of papers and found the audit memo. The name at the bottom was Mr. Harrison, CEO. I looked at Jean. "Do you have a phone book?" Russo smirked. "This isn't 1990, Ben. Let me." He pulled out his smartphone, tapped the screen a few times, and found the corporate registry. "Mr. Harrison, CEO, Tech Solutions," got his private line. It was 6:30 in the morning. I didn't care. I took the phone from Russo and dialed. A voice answered on the second ring, sharp, angry, and awake. "Who is this?" "My name is Ben Carter," I said, my voice steady. "I am the father-in-law of your finance manager, Megan Carter. I think you're going to want to hear this." I laid it all out. The audit, the embezzlement, the offshore account. "You're aware of the audit this coming Monday, right?" I asked. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Well," I continued, "Megan knows about it too, and she's planning to be in a non-extradition country by Sunday, with $842,000 of your company's money. I have the Cayman account number right here. You want to write it down?" Another beat of silence. Then the voice on the other end, no longer sleepy or angry, but cold, pure cold steel. "Where are you, Mr. Carter? I'm on my way." It was almost 10 o'clock at night. Thursday. Nearly 24 hours had passed since I'd first opened that folder in Jean's office. 24 hours since my world had cracked open, revealing the rot underneath. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I was running on something else. A cold, clear anger that felt like fuel. Russo had told me to stay away. "Go to a hotel, Ben," he'd said, his voice firm over the phone after he'd left Jean's office. "I'm setting things in motion. The DA's office, Harrison at Tech Solutions. They're all moving. Let us and the police handle the takedown. Don't confront them. They're desperate. They're dangerous." I heard what he said, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't just hide. I needed to see their faces. I needed to stand in my home, the one they had tried to steal, and I needed them to see me. Not the confused, grieving old man they had so easily dismissed. Not the walking ATM they had been withdrawing from for years. I needed them to see the man who had built the very walls that were now closing in on them. I parked the truck down the street under a broken streetlight just in case they were watching. I walked up the driveway. The house was dark. Completely dark. No lights on in the kitchen, none in the living room. The white construction van was gone. That was the first thing I noticed. My stomach tightened. Had they already run? Oh. Had I waited too long? Had they gotten spooked? I used my key. The lock turned. They hadn't changed it. Arrogant. Or just sloppy, like Jean said. I stepped inside. The house was cold. The smell of sawdust and ripped raw oak was heavy in the air. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the living room, my feet navigating the cardboard boxes marked Goodwill by muscle memory. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. The place where my life, my trust had been murdered. I felt like a stranger, an intruder in my own past. I moved toward the kitchen, and I saw them. They were just sitting there, in the dark, like statues in a graveyard. Adam was slumped at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, perfectly still. Megan was standing by the sink, rigid, her back to me, staring out the window into the black, rain-soaked yard. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. The silence in the room was heavier than the darkness, thick with fear. They looked exactly like what they were, two animals caught in a trap, listening for the hunter's footsteps. My step on the threshold on the old floorboard that always creaked broke the silence. Adam's head snapped up. His eyes were wide, red-rimmed in the faint moonlight coming through the window. "Dad." His voice was a shaky whisper. "Dad, where were you? We were worried. We've been calling you." A lie. A pathetic, reflexive lie. My phone had been silent all day except for the calls from Russo and Jean. Megan turned, slowly. She didn't look surprised. She looked cornered. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law was gone. That mask had been burned away. This was someone else. Her face was pale, drawn tight, her eyes narrowed to slits. All the plastic had melted away, leaving only the hard, ugly frame underneath. "Old man," she hissed. Her voice was low, venomous. "What did you do?" I didn't answer her. I kept my eyes on my son. "You were worried, Adam, or were you just worried your escape plan had hit a snag?" Adam started to tremble, a visible shaking in his hands that were gripping the edge of the table. What plan, Dad? I don't know what you're talking about." "What did you do?" Megan demanded again, taking a step toward me. She was done pretending. This was the real her. This was the woman Carol had seen from the very beginning. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I suddenly felt very tired, but also very tall. "Well," I said, letting the silence stretch for a beat. "I had a busy day, a very productive day." I looked at Adam, who looked like he was about to be sick. "I went to see Jean Huss, my accountant." Adam flinched, a small, violent jerk as if I'd struck him. "And then," I continued, turning my gaze to Megan, "I went to see my lawyer, a man named Russo. You wouldn't know him. He's very expensive, and very, very good at what he does." I watched her face. She was processing it, calculating, trying to figure out what I knew, what I could prove. The smirk, that arrogant, condescending smirk she always wore when she'd get me to pay for dinner, that look that said, "You're so easy to fool." It was gone. Completely. Her face was a blank white mask of dawning terrible fear. And after that, I said, saving the best for the last, Jean and Russo and I, we all got on a conference call. It was very interesting. We spoke to the CEO of your company, Megan, a man named Harrison, a very nice man. He was fascinated to hear all about your retirement plans. That did it. Adam made a small choking sound like he'd been punched in the gut. Megan's face just collapsed. The blood drained from it so fast, she looked gray. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She put a hand on the kitchen counter to steady herself. "You," she whispered. "You. What did you say?" I looked at her right into her cold, dead eyes. "I said," I replied, letting every word land like a hammer blow that I'm sure that audit on Monday is going to be very, very interesting. Adam actually seemed to relax for a second. He thought he'd done it. He thought that by throwing his wife under the bus, he'd saved himself. He turned to the detectives, the tall one, the one in charge. He tried to muster up some pathetic shred of dignity. "Officers, I'm a victim here," he stammered, gesturing toward me. "Just as much as he is. She handles all the finances. I had no idea about any of that Cayman stuff. I just thought we were getting a loan on the house. She lied to both of us. I'm a victim too." He was actually trying to align himself with me after everything. He was still talking when another man stepped forward. This one wasn't wearing a suit. He was younger, wearing a tactical vest over his polo shirt, and he had a different kind of energy. He hadn't been with the first group. He'd clearly come in from the back porch. He had a quiet, dangerous feel about him. He looked past Megan, past the white-collar detectives, and he zeroed in on my son. "Adam Carter?" the new officer asked. His voice wasn't like the other detectives. It was sharp. Adam, still in the middle of his victim speech, looked confused, annoyed even at being interrupted. "Yes," he answered, his voice weak. The officer pulled his own set of handcuffs from his belt. "Sir, you are under arrest." Adam's face just broke. "What? No. I just told you I'm the victim. She did it. I'm cooperating." "Sir, you're under arrest," the officer continued, as if reading from a script, "for conspiracy to commit wire fraud." "I didn't conspire," Adam shrieked, his voice climbing an octave. "Felony elder abuse and financial exploitation, and we also have a warrant related to your involvement with illegal gambling and loan sharking operations." I hadn't even known that was coming. It turned out Russo and Harrison hadn't just called the white-collar guys. When they heard about the loan shark, Mr. T, they had also flagged the organized crime unit. And when that unit started digging into Mr. T, Adam's name wasn't just on the list. It was at the top of the list. They weren't just after him for the money. They were building a racketeering case, and Adam was their star witness, whether he liked it or not. The police hadn't just come for Megan. They had come for everyone. They had hit the whole operation in one coordinated sweep. Adam's eyes went wide. "Elder abuse, know that." "No, that's my father," he yelled, pointing at me as if I were his alibi. I wouldn't abuse him." The tactical officer didn't blink. He just stepped forward, grabbed Adam's arm, and in one smooth, practiced motion, spun him around, pushing him against the kitchen counter right next to the sink. "You knowingly," the detective said, his voice hard, right in Adam's ear, "allowed your father, a grieving senior, to be tricked into signing away his primary residence. You participated in a plan to have him forcibly removed and institutionalized, all so you could leverage his property to pay your illegal gambling debts." He wrenched Adam's arms behind his back. "That, sir," he grunted, "is the literal definition of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." The officer yanked Adam's hands behind his back. The sound, click, 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 of the second set of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the kitchen. My son. My son. In handcuffs. His face was pressed against the stainless steel sink, the one Carol had picked out. He looked at me. His face, which had been pale with fear, was now slick with tears of pure panic. The reality of what was happening had finally hit him. He wasn't just in trouble with his wife. He wasn't just in trouble with a loan shark. He was in trouble with the law. He was going to jail. "Dad," he wailed, his voice cracking, turning into the cry of a terrified little boy. Dad, please don't let them do this. Tell them it was a mistake, Dad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Dad. I just stood there in the doorway of my kitchen. I looked at the man who was my son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I saw the wreckage of my bedroom upstairs. I saw the boxes marked Goodwill. I saw the glossy brochure for the Golden Sunset shoebox. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. I looked at him, cuffed, sobbing, being pushed toward the door by the second team. You shouldn't be apologizing to me, Adam, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel on his wrists. You should be apologizing to your mother. Adam completely lost it. He scrambled up from the floor, his eyes white with pure animal terror. Loan sharks, he shrieked, grabbing the front of my shirt, his knuckles white. Dad, what did you do? What did you do? They're coming here. They'll kill us. They'll kill all of us. Shut up, Adam, Megan screamed. She wasn't panicking. Not yet. She was acting. She grabbed her expensive handbag from the counter, the one I'm sure was bought with stolen money, and bolted for the back door, the one leading to the garage where her Audi was parked. We have to go, she yelled at him. Now forget the money, we have to go. She fumbled with the deadbolt. It's too late, Megan, I said. My voice was calm. It echoed in the small, dark kitchen. Tonight was hell. But it was a hell of my own making. A hell I had arranged. I had spent the entire afternoon at Russo's office, and we weren't alone. Mr. Harrison, the CEO she had been robbing blind, was there. A man with cold, quiet eyes who did not like being stolen from. And 2 detectives from the white-collar division. Russo had laid out the whole timeline, the entire ugly story. Megan's embezzlement, the Monday audit, her escape plan meticulously documented in her own files, and then Adam's messy, violent gambling debt that was forcing their hand, turning their clean getaway into a frantic dash for cash. They knew she was a flight risk. They knew Adam was entangled with violent criminals. They weren't just going to send a patrol car to serve a warrant tomorrow. They were going to bring them both down all at once. Tonight. Megan finally got the deadbolt undone. She ripped the door open, ready to make a run for the garage, ready to flee. And she stopped. Dead. 2 men were standing on the back porch, silhouetted against the dim motion sensor light. They weren't loan sharks. They were tall, wearing suits, their hands resting loosely at their sides. They didn't look like they were in a hurry. Mrs. Megan Carter, one of them said. His voice was polite but firm, carrying clearly into the kitchen. We're with the county police. We need you to please step back inside the house. She didn't move. She just froze, her hand still gripping the doorknob. Her head swiveled slowly, turning back to look at me across the room. Her face. It was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. The color had drained from it. She mouthed a single word. You. At that exact second, a sound hammered through the house. Not a polite knock. A loud, heavy official pounding on the front door. Boom! 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 It was the sound of authority. The sound of the end of the line. Adam screamed again, a high-pitched, terrified sound. He hadn't seen the detectives at the back. He only heard the pounding at the front. He thought it was them. He thought it was Mr. T and his leg breakers coming to collect their $150,000. Megan spun around, her panic finally breaking through her cold composure. Her eyes were wild. She looked at the back door, blocked by detectives. She looked at the front door where the pounding was coming from. And then she looked at me. This was the moment. The one she had created. "Why is the police knocking on our door?" she shrieked at me, her voice cracking with hysteria. She still didn't get it. She thought I had called them. She thought I'd called the local cops for trespassing, a minor charge, not realizing the detectives at the back door were for her. She still thought she was in control. She still thought this was about her rules, her game. I looked at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just shook my head. They aren't here for me, Megan. I walked past them. I left them standing there in the kitchen, 2 animals in a trap, and I went to the front door. The pounding had stopped, but I knew they were still there. My hand was steady on the doorknob. This was it. The end of the line. I opened the door. 2 more detectives stood on my porch. They were older, wearing trench coats, looking like they'd stepped out of an old movie. They looked tired, and they looked serious. "Ben Carter," the taller one asked. "Yes," I said. "We're here at the request of Mr. Harrison of Tech Solutions, and on behalf of the district attorney's office." I nodded, stepping back from the door. "I've been expecting you, gentlemen. Please come in." They stepped into the foyer, their feet heavy on the hardwood floor I laid. Their eyes took in the scene in the living room. The packed boxes, the Goodwill labels, the general air of chaos and violation. They didn't comment. They were professionals. They knew a crime scene when they saw one. I followed them. My heart wasn't pounding anymore. It was slow, heavy, like a drumbeat. I followed them down the short hall into the kitchen. The scene was frozen. The 2 detectives from the back porch had stepped inside, blocking the garage door. Adam was still babbling, pressed against the cabinets, his hands fluttering. I didn't mean, she said it was just a loan." And Megan. She was rigid. She was trapped. The front was blocked. The back was blocked. Her eyes darted from the new detectives to the old ones, and then to me. Her face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. I just looked at her. I looked at this smart, calculating woman who had planned every single detail. She had the quitclaim deed forged or tricked, it didn't matter. She had the glossy brochure for the Golden Sunset shoebox. She had the forged signatures, the offshore account, the escape plan. She had the audit date. She had the arrogant assumption that I was just a sad, senile old man who could be swept into a corner like so much sawdust. She had it all figured out. She had crossed every T. She had dotted every I. She had planned for everything. Except for one thing. She forgot that the confused, forgetful old man she was trying to throw away was still lucid. She forgot that this clueless old man still had friends. She forgot that this clueless old man had built this very house with his bare hands, and he would not let it go without a fight. She forgot that my love for Carol and my anger at what they were doing to her memory was a hell of a lot stronger than her greed. She forgot that I wasn't stupid. I was just grieving. The lead detective, the tall one from the front door, walked right past Adam as if he were a piece of furniture. His eyes were locked on Megan. He stopped about 3 feet in front of her. "Mrs. Megan Carter," he said again. His voice was not loud. It was heavy. It filled the entire kitchen. She just stared at him, her chest heaving, those calculating wheels in her mind finally grinding to a halt, smoking and seizing up. "You are under arrest," he said the words clean and sharp, "for felony embezzlement, wire fraud, and suspicion of money laundering." The sound that came out of Megan wasn't a word. It was a high, thin, terrible shriek. It was the sound of a balloon popping, the sound of a life imploding. "No!" she screamed as one of the other detectives grabbed her arm and twisted it not gently behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in my life. "No! You can't do this. This is a mistake. This is his fault," she shrieked, twisting against the metal, her eyes wild, pointing at me. "He's confused. He's lying. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's saying." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," the detective started. "Adam!" Megan screamed, ignoring the officer. She was desperate now. Her eyes found my son, who was still trying to melt into the wall. Adam, tell them it's a mistake. Tell them he's a confused old man. Adam, say something. Every eye in the room, all 4 detectives, me, all turned to my son. Adam was pressed so hard against the cabinets I thought he might phase through the wood. He was pale as death, his whole body shaking, his face wet with tears and sweat. He looked at Megan, cuffed her life over. He looked at the 4 stone-faced detectives filling his kitchen. And then he looked at me. I just held his gaze. I said nothing. I just waited. He made his choice. I didn't know anything. He stammered the words tumbling out of him in a pathetic rush. I didn't know, I swear, it was her, it was all her. He pointed a shaking finger at his own wife. The money, the accounts, the Cayman Islands. I didn't know anything about it. She handles all the finances. I just thought we were getting a loan for the house. I swear to God, it was all her. Megan stopped struggling. She went completely, utterly still. The detectives, the noise, the room, everything just faded away. She slowly, very slowly, turned her head and looked at her husband. The expression on her face. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't anger. It was a look of such pure, cold, venomous hatred that I almost took a step back. You coward! She spat, her voice a low, terrifying hiss. You weak, pathetic coward! Adam actually seemed to relax for a second. I watched the tension drain out of his shoulders. He thought he'd done it. He thought that by throwing his wife under the bus, he'd saved himself. He turned to the detectives, the tall one, the one in charge. He tried to muster up some pathetic shred of dignity, wiping his tear-streaked face with the back of his hand. Officers, I'm a victim here, he stammered, gesturing toward me. Just as much as he is. She handles all the finances. I had no idea about any of that. That Cayman stuff. I just thought we were getting a loan on the house. She lied to both of us. I'm a victim too. He was actually trying to align himself with me after everything. He was still talking when another man stepped forward. This one wasn't wearing a suit. He was younger, wearing a tactical vest over his polo shirt, and he had a different kind of energy. He hadn't been with the first group. He'd clearly come in from the back porch. He had a quiet, dangerous feel about him. He looked past Megan, past the white-collar detectives, and he zeroed in on my son. Adam Carter, the new officer asked. His voice wasn't like the other detectives. It was sharp. Adam, still in the middle of his victim speech, looked confused, annoyed even at being interrupted. Yes, he answered, his voice weak. The officer pulled his own set of handcuffs from his belt. Sir, you are under arrest. Adam's face just broke. What? No, I just told you I'm the victim. She did it. I'm cooperating. Sir, you're under arrest, the officer continued, as if reading from a script, for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I didn't conspire, Adam shrieked, his voice climbing an octave. Felony elder abuse and financial exploitation. And we also have a warrant related to your involvement with illegal gambling and loan sharking operations. I hadn't even known that was coming. It turned out Russo and Harrison hadn't just called the white-collar guys. When they heard about the loan shark, Mr. T, they had also flagged the organized crime unit. And when that unit started digging into Mr. T, Adam's name wasn't just on the list. It was at the top of the list. They weren't just after him for the money. They were building a racketeering case, and Adam was their star witness, whether he liked it or not. The police hadn't just come for Megan. They had come for everyone. They had hit the whole operation in one coordinated sweep. Adam's eyes went wide. Elder abuse, no. That's my father, he yelled, pointing at me as if I were his alibi. I wouldn't abuse him. The tactical officer didn't blink. He just stepped forward, grabbed Adam's arm, and in one smooth, practiced motion, spun him around, pushing him against the kitchen counter right next to the sink. "You knowingly—" the detective said, his voice hard, right in Adam's ear. "Allowed your father, a grieving senior, to be tricked into signing away his primary residence. You participated in a plan to have him forcibly removed and institutionalized, all so you could leverage his property to pay your illegal gambling debts." He wrenched Adam's arms behind his back. "That, sir," he grunted, "is the literal definition of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." The officer yanked Adam's hands behind his back. The sound, click, 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 of the second set of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the kitchen. My son, in handcuffs. His face was pressed against the stainless steel sink, the one Carol had picked out. He looked at me. His face, which had been pale with fear, was now slick with tears of pure panic. The reality of what was happening had finally hit him. He wasn't just in trouble with his wife. He wasn't just in trouble with a loan shark. He was in trouble with the law. He was going to jail. "Dad," he wailed, his voice cracking, turning into the cry of a terrified little boy. "Dad, please, don't let them do this. Tell them it was a mistake, Dad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Dad." I just stood there in the doorway of my kitchen. I looked at the man who was my son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I saw the wreckage of my bedroom upstairs. I saw the boxes marked Goodwill. I saw the glossy brochure for the Golden Sunset shoebox. And I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. I looked at him, cuffed, sobbing, being pushed toward the door by the second team. "You shouldn't be apologizing to me, Adam," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel on his wrists. "You should be apologizing to your mother." The front door closed. The sound of their cars, the police cruisers, faded down the street. And then, silence. The same crushing, absolute silence that had haunted this house for 8 months. But this was different. This wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of emptiness. Of a storm having passed, leaving only the wreckage behind. The police had been there until almost 3 a.m. They asked me questions. I answered. They took photos. They put a long, ugly strip of yellow tape across Megan's home office door, the one that used to be a spare bedroom. "Crime scene. Do not cross." It looked absurd, tacked onto the pale blue wallpaper Carol had picked out. And then they left. They took Adam and Megan in separate cars. I watched the red and blue lights flash against the houses across the street, painting my neighbors' windows, before finally disappearing around the corner. I was alone. I hadn't slept. How could I? I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where Adam had wept on the floor, and Megan had snarled like a cornered animal. The floor was scuffed with the muddy boot prints of strangers. I looked at the coffee maker. I went to the back of the pantry behind the oatmeal and the canned soup, and I found the good beans. The expensive ones Carol kept in a sealed tin for special occasions. I figured this qualified. I brewed a pot. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and dark, cutting through the lingering sense of sawdust, fear, and failure. My son's failure. My failure as a father who hadn't seen. I held the warm mug in my hands. My hands. They were steady. For the first time in what felt like a year, they were perfectly steady. I had survived. I had taken back my home. Russo had called me while the police were still here, his voice gruff, wired on adrenaline and coffee. "It's done, Ben. The civil suit is a formality now. The injunction will be filed by 8 a.m. The house is yours." It was my house. I looked at the wreckage, the splintered floors upstairs, the boxes marked Goodwill. My house. It felt violated. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, black, and bitter. It was perfect. I was just starting to think about what I'd do first, call a cleanup crew, or just light a match when I heard it. A knock on the front door. I froze my mug halfway to my lips. My first thought, a jolt of pure fear, was the loan shark. Had the police missed someone? Had Adam's call for help somehow been real? I put the mug down. The knock came again. Rap, tap, tap. It wasn't the heavy pounding fist of the detectives. It wasn't the frantic, desperate sound of a man in trouble. It was a cheerful, rhythmic, almost perky knock. I got up slowly, my joints aching. Who now? A neighbor, Russo. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the front door. I looked through the peephole. My heart, which had finally started to slow down, skipped a beat. I had forgotten. In all the chaos, in the embezzlement, the loan sharks, the arrests, I had completely, totally forgotten the final, meticulous, evil little detail of Megan's plan. Standing on my porch was a woman. She was young, maybe 30, and wearing bright blue medical scrubs. She had a smile so wide and white it looked like it was starched onto her face. She was holding a clipboard. Behind her on the walkway, 2 men in matching blue uniforms stood next to a clean white van. On the side of the van, in cheerful looping script, were the words, Golden Sunset Senior Community. They were here. The van. The one Megan had ordered. They were here to take me away. I actually almost laughed. The sheer, cold-blooded efficiency of that woman. Even from a holding cell downtown, her evil little plan was still chugging along right on schedule. I opened the door. "Good morning," the nurse chirped. She was radiating a level of professional perkiness that was almost terrifying. "Mr. Ben Carter." "I am," I said. "Wonderful. I'm Nurse Patty. We're from Golden Sunset. We are so excited to have you join our community." She looked down at her clipboard. "My goodness, we're all set. Mrs. Carter, your lovely daughter-in-law, arranged everything. She was so worried about you. We're just here to help you with the transition. The van is all ready for you and your personal belongings." Her smile faltered just a bit as she peeked over my shoulder into the living room. She saw the stacks of cardboard boxes marked Goodwill. She saw the overturned end table, the bare walls. "Oh my," she said, her voice dropping to a low, concerned whisper. She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice as if I were a frightened animal. "Oh, you poor dear. It looks like Mrs. Carter was right. You really are having a hard time managing on your own, aren't you?" She looked past me toward the stairs where the splintered oak floorboards were visible from the landing. "Oh my goodness. This place is just... It's not safe for you, is it?" She gave me a look of profound professional pity. "Don't you worry one bit, Mr. Carter. That's why we're here. We're going to take you to your new home. It's clean, it's safe, and the food is wonderful. Our 2 attendants, Mark and Gary, will just come in and help you with your things, and we'll have you settled in before lunch." She was so sure, so confident. She was here to save the confused old man from himself. I looked at her bright, smiling face. I looked at the 2 attendants who were already reaching for the handles on a gurney in the back of the van. I looked at the van, my Golden Sunset hearse, and I started to laugh. It wasn't a sad laugh. It wasn't an angry laugh. It was a deep, genuine belly laugh. It felt so good it almost hurt. Nurse Patty's smile faltered. She looked genuinely confused now. Mr. Carter, are you all right?" I wiped a tear from my eye. "Patty," I said, catching my breath, "I appreciate you coming all this way. I really do. But I'm afraid there's been a small change in plans. A change, but Mrs. Carter confirmed the transport just yesterday afternoon. She paid the deposit and everything." "Yes, I'm sure she did," I said, leaning against the doorframe, my coffee mug still in my hand. "But you see, Mrs. Carter isn't going to be able to... Well, she won't be able to confirm anything for a while. She's indisposed." Indisposed? Patty asked, her clipboard lowering. Is she ill? Would we send a car for her? No, nothing like that, I said, taking another pleasant sip. She's being detained at the county jail for embezzlement and fraud and a few other things. The nurse's mouth opened, and it just stayed open. So if you'll excuse me, I said, smiling warmly for the first time in 8 months. I have a house to clean up. You have a wonderful day. I slowly and very gently closed the door in her perfectly stunned face. I stood there in the foyer, my hand still on the doorknob, and just listened. I could hear the faint sound of Nurse Patty's cheerful voice, now sounding confused and agitated as she spoke into her own phone outside. Yes, I'm not sure what's happening. He said she's detained. I heard the van door slide shut, the engine start, and then the sound of them driving away, taking Megan's final, perfectly planned insult with them. I locked the my deadbolt, on my door. I walked back to the kitchen, the pot of coffee still trum on the burner. I picked up my phone again. This time I was the one making the scheduled call. Russo picked up on the first ring. Ben, tell me you're all right. I heard you didn't leave the house last night. I was worried. I'm fine, Russo, I said, pouring another cup. My hand was perfectly steady. I just had to turn away some visitors. Visitors? What visitors? The police detail was supposed to secure the house. No, not them, I said. I took a sip of the hot black coffee. It was the team from the Golden Sunset nursing home. Apparently my daughter-in-law had me scheduled for pickup at 9 a.m. sharp. They were very punctual. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Russo let out a sigh that sounded like steam escaping a pipe. My God, Ben, that woman, she's not just a snake. She's a viper. She really crossed every T on her evil plan. She was thorough, I agreed. What's the status on our end? We filed, Russo said, his voice all business again. I filed the emergency injunction and the civil suit at 8 a.m. the second the courthouse opened. We're petitioning for an immediate nullification of the quitclaim deed citing felony fraud and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. With the criminal charges Harrison is pressing and the evidence you provided, no judge is going to let this stand. We'll have a temporary order by this afternoon, and the deed will be reversed and back in your name free and clear probably within the week. Good, I said. That's good. You just sit tight, Ben. Don't talk to anyone. The police will be back to get a final statement. Just rest. You've been through hell. I hung up the phone. Rest. It sounded like a foreign word. I picked up my coffee mug and started to walk. I just walked through my house. The house I built. I went into the living room, navigating around the cardboard boxes. Goodwill. My entire life reduced to a tax write-off for them. I touched the box containing Carol's reading chair. I could still see her there, curled up with a book, her feet tucked under her, looking up at me and smiling when I'd bring her a cup of tea. Now that memory was tainted. I could only see Megan's handwriting scrawled on the side like graffiti. I went upstairs. I had to see it. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom. The construction crew had done a lot of damage in just a few hours. The beautiful oak floors were a splintered wreck. The drywall was gouged where they'd been careless with their tools. The pile of our furniture draped in that filthy plastic looked like a funeral pyre. This was where I had held Carol's hand as she took her last breath. This was sacred ground. I'd sat in that chair by the window for 3 straight days, just holding her hand, listening to her breathe. And they had treated it like a demolition site. The house wasn't just quiet anymore. It was violated. It was soiled. Every corner I looked, I didn't see Carol's ghost anymore. I saw their ghosts. I saw Megan standing there with her blueprints. I saw Adam cowering. I saw the detectives, the handcuffs, the yellow tape across the hallway. This wasn't my home. Not anymore. They had taken that from me more effectively than any forged deed. They had poisoned the well. They had taken 40 years of memories and poured gasoline on them. I pulled out my phone again. I dialed Russo. He picked up immediately. Ben, what's wrong? Did they come back? No, I said, my voice quiet. I was looking at the empty spot on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. They'd packed that too. I want to add something to the plan. What is it? You remember something else? I want the house back, I said, my voice firm. I want the title in my name free and clear, just like you said. Of course, Russo said. That's what we're doing. The injunction is already in motion. But I'm not going to live here anymore, I said. There was another pause. This one was longer. Ben, what are you saying? It's ruined, I said. It was that simple. It's ruined. The second we get that title back, the second it's legally mine again. I want you to sell it. Ben, are you sure? Russo asked, his voice softer now. This is your home. You built it. This is Carol's house. I closed my eyes. I could smell the splintered wood and the cold, damp air from the destroyed floorboards. It was our home, I answered. Now, it's just a pile of bricks and wood full of bad memories. I need a fresh start, Russo. I need to go somewhere. The ghosts, their ghosts, can't follow me. 6 months. 180 days of lawyers' depositions and sleepless nights. That's how long it took for the wheels of justice to grind their way here. I sat on a hard wooden bench in the back of courtroom 3B. The room smelled like stale coffee and old floor wax. It was the smell of bad decisions. The civil suit. That had been fast. Russo, true to his word, had been a bulldog. He'd filed the emergency injunction that very same Friday, less than 24 hours after I'd hired him. He'd marched into a judge's chambers with the stack of evidence Jean and I had printed. The quitclaim deed, the Cayman Islands bank statements, the email about the Monday audit, the threats from the loan shark, the Golden Sunset Reservation. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Alvarez, hadn't even let Megan's hastily hired lawyer finish his first sentence. She'd called the quitclaim deed unconscionable and a predatory act against a grieving senior. She'd nullified the transfer on the spot. The house was already legally mine again. That part was over. But this was the criminal trial. This wasn't about property. This was about the crime. I looked at her. Megan. She was sitting at the defendant's table next to a tired-looking public defender. The woman who had stood in my kitchen like a queen, her eyes flashing with cold fire. She was gone. The Megan sitting there now. She looked small. She'd aged 10 years in those 6 months in the county jail, unable to make bail. Her expensive highlights were grown out, her roots a dull, lifeless brown. The sharp tailored blazers were gone, replaced by an ill-fitting gray suit that hung off her shoulders. The arrogance, the smug superiority, the plastic smile, all of it had been burned away. All that was left was a dull, hollow fear. Adam wasn't sitting with her. He was on the other side of the courtroom near the prosecutor's table, sitting behind them, his shoulders hunched. He'd turned on her. Of course he had. The moment the detectives laid out the case, the embezzlement, the fraud, the racketeering charges, they were connecting to the loan shark. Adam had done what Adam always did. He'd found the path of least resistance. He'd taken a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and to the felony charge of financial exploitation of an elder. In exchange for that plea and for agreeing to testify against his own wife, he was getting a reduced sentence. He had sung like a canary. I'd had to sit here in this same courtroom 2 months ago and listened to my son describe in pathetic detail how Megan had manipulated him, how she had come up with the plan for the deed, how she had handled all the money. He cried on the stand. He painted himself as a victim, too. Maybe he was. Maybe they were just two vipers eating each other. The jury had found Megan guilty on all counts last week. Today was just the sentencing. The judge, the same Judge Alvarez from the civil case she had requested the criminal trial as well, was reading from a stack of papers. A profound and calculated breach of trust, the judge was saying, looking at Megan over her glasses. Her voice was sharp and left no room for pity. This was not a crime of passion or a single lapse in judgment. This was a meticulous, predatory campaign against two separate victims. Your employer who trusted you with their finances, and your own family who trusted you with their home and their heart. She sentenced her first. On the count of felony embezzlement, this court sentences you to a term of no less than 7 and no more than 10 years in the state correctional facility. 7 to 10 years. Megan just wilted. She made no sound. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just seemed to collapse in on herself as if her spine had dissolved. Then the judge turned to Adam. "Mr. Carter, please rise." Adam stood, his body shaking so hard I could see it from the back row. "Your actions were in many ways just as monstrous. You betrayed the trust of the man who raised you. You stood by and allowed this violation, to happen in his darkest hour of grief. That this court finds is despicable." Adam was openly weeping, now his shoulders shaking. "However," the judge continued, "you have taken the first step toward responsibility. You have admitted your guilt. You have cooperated fully with the prosecution against your co-conspirator. Therefore, this court sentences you to 3 years suspended. You will serve 5 years of formal probation. You will pay restitution to your father for all damages as calculated by the civil court. You will complete 1,000 hours of community service, and you will attend mandatory counseling for your gambling addiction. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Your Honor." Adam sobbed, his voice cracking. "Yes, thank you, thank you." A marshal moved toward Megan, touching her elbow to tell her to stand. She rose like a puppet, her face blank numb. The marshal put the cuffs on her, and as they led her past the bar, her eyes found mine. The numbness vanished. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. "You," she hissed, her voice cutting through the quiet courtroom. "You did this. You destroyed my family. You destroyed my life." The marshals tugged on her arm, but she wouldn't move, her eyes locked on me. You old bastard, you couldn't just die. You couldn't just go quietly." I stood up slowly. I wasn't going to let her have the last word. Not in my story. I walked down the center aisle until I was just a few feet away, separated by the wooden bar. I looked right back into her eyes. They were filled with hate. Mine were just empty. "No," I said, my voice clear, not loud, but everyone heard it. You did that the moment you decided that money was more important than people. You did that when you saw my grief, not as a wound to heal, but as an opportunity to exploit. You destroyed yourself, Megan. You just didn't realize it until today." She spat. The marshal pulled her hard this time, and she stumbled, disappearing through the side door. It was over. I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. It was Adam. He was standing there, his suit rumpled, his face slick with tears. He was free. He wasn't in handcuffs. "Dad," he started, his voice thick, choking. "Dad, I don't know what He was searching for something. Forgiveness. Absolution. For me to say, "It's okay, son, we can fix this." But I couldn't. The well was dry, and I just held up my hand. A simple gesture, palm out. It stopped him cold. He looked at my hand, then at my face. His lips trembled. Dad, please. Can't we? Don't, Adam, I said, my voice flat, exhausted. Just don't. You have 5 years of probation. 5 years to figure out how to be a man. Go. Use them. Fix your life. But you're my father. And you're my son, I said. And look what we've done. I took a step back. Don't call me Adam. If you ever truly fix yourself, you'll know where to find me. But until then, don't call me. I turned my back on my son, and I walked out of the courtroom alone into the bright, cold sunlight. 1 year later, I stood on a balcony, a warm, gentle breeze ruffling my hair. I wasn't in Michigan. I wasn't in that courtroom. I was in Florida, looking out over the Atlantic Ocean. The water was a shade of blue I'd only ever seen in magazines. After the trial, after I walked out of that courthouse and left my son standing there, I never went back to the house on Willow Creek Drive. I couldn't. Russo, my lawyer, handled everything. He hired a crew to clear out the mess. They threw away the construction debris. They separated the junk. And they found my boxes, the ones marked Goodwill. They saved Carol's armchair. They saved my model trains. But I told Russo to sell it all. The furniture, the house, everything. It sold in a week. Even with the damaged floors, the market was high. The house I'd built, the land I owned, it was worth a lot more than I realized. So I left. I packed 2 suitcases, put Carol's armchair in storage, and I drove south until the snow turned into sunshine. I bought this condo. It's not a house. It's small, modern, and clean with a big balcony that overlooks the sea. It's a place with no ghosts. The air here is warm. The silence isn't the heavy, grieving silence of the old house. It's a peaceful silence filled with the sound of the ocean and the cry of seagulls. I can fish every single day right off the pier. I usually throw them back. It's not about the catching. It's about the waiting. It's about the peace. I even joined a club, a volunteer woodshop down at the community center. It's run by a bunch of old carpenters and mechanics like me. We call ourselves the Sawdust Brigade. We make wooden toys, simple things, trucks, dolls, little boats. We donate them to the Children's Hospital down in Miami. It feels good. It feels like building instead of breaking. It feels like using my hands for what they were meant for. Creating something solid. Something good. I was standing on that balcony holding a check. I'd been holding it for an hour, just looking at the number. It was a big number. It was the last of the money from the sale of the house after buying this condo, after paying Russo his well-deserved fee. It was the remainder of my old life. I walked inside to my small desk, the one that looked out over the water. I picked up a pen. It wasn't a cheap pen. It was a good heavy one. I'd bought it last week. I signed my name, Ben Carter, on the signature line. It was a donation, a large one, to a legal aid foundation that specialized in one thing, and one thing only, helping seniors who were victims of financial elder abuse. I wrote in the memo line, my handwriting clear and steady, the Carol Carter Memorial Fund. I folded the check, slipped it into the waiting envelope, and sealed it. It felt right. It felt like the last board sliding into place. It felt finished. I picked up my coffee mug. The sun was warm on my face, streaming through the sliding glass door. And then my phone rang. It buzzed on the glass table, an unfamiliar number. I didn't get many calls. I didn't know anyone here really outside of the woodshop. I picked it up and... Hello? A pause. A long pause. I could hear breathing on the other end. Faint, shaky. And the sound of machinery, a saw, maybe in the distance. I almost hung up. Dad. The voice. I almost didn't recognize it. It was my son, but it wasn't the weak, whining voice of the boy in the kitchen. It wasn't the sobbing, pathetic voice of the man in the courtroom. This voice was different. It was deeper, quieter, tired. I hadn't spoken to him in a year, not since I'd walked away from him at the courthouse. I hadn't taken his calls. I hadn't answered his texts. I sat down. My hand gripped the coffee mug. Adam. It wasn't a question. It was just a statement. Another long silence. I could hear him struggling to find the words. Dad, he said again. I know you said not to call, but I'm working. At a lumber yard. Out west. In Oregon. A lumber yard. Not a consulting business. Not an investment scheme. A real job. It's hard work, he said, his voice quiet. It's really hard. Heavy. The pay is low. I'm just a laborer. I stack lumber all day. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I looked out at the ocean. I just wanted to say. His voice cracked just once, but he caught it. He cleared his throat. I'm sore. Every night. My hands, they're all calloused. They bleed sometimes. He paused. I just wanted to say I get it now. I finally understand how hard you worked. All those years. Building the house and working all day and then coming home to fix things, and I never understood. I never even saw it. And I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was just stating a fact. I held the phone. I looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue. I thought of the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, and this new third person, this stranger on the phone who was just now learning the feel of real work. Maybe there was hope. But I couldn't say it. It wasn't my place to say it. His 5 years of probation, this was his journey, not mine. I took a breath. Thank you for calling, Adam, I said, my voice even. Keep working hard. I heard him take a sharp breath like he was about to say something else. But I pressed the end button. I put the phone down. I looked out at the sea. Maybe someday he'd find his way back. Maybe he'd finally become the man Carol and I had tried to raise. But I wasn't waiting for him. Not anymore. They thought I was a clueless old man. They thought I was a grieving, forgetful fool they could just pack away in a box. They forgot that this old man is the one who taught them how to hold a hammer. They forgot that I'm the one who built the damn house. And they forgot that I know exactly where everything is buried. I picked up my coffee mug. I turned and I walked back inside, letting the warm Florida sun hit my face. I put the phone down on the glass table. The sound it made was small, barely a click. I looked at it for a long time. Adam, in Oregon, stacking lumber. My first instinct was cynicism. A part of me, the new hard part that had grown over the past year, whispered that it was just another act. Another angle. Maybe he'd found out from Russo's office that I'd sold the house. Maybe he thought a little apology, a story about calloused hands, would be enough to get his inheritance back. But the voice was different. It wasn't the weak, whining boy in the kitchen. It wasn't the sobbing, pathetic man in the courtroom. It was just tired. It sounded like a man who had finally hit the bottom. A man who was finally learning that life, real life, is heavy, that it leaves splinters. Maybe it was real, maybe. I looked out at the ocean. The sun was high, sparkling on the blue water. A year ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. I'm sorry, Dad. I get it now. I would have wept. I would have driven across the country to save him. But now, I just felt quiet. I realized the call hadn't made me happy. It hadn't made me angry. It just was. It was a single small sound in my new peaceful life. It didn't fix what was broken. It didn't unsign the papers. It didn't unpack the boxes. It didn't bring Carol back. It didn't erase the 8 months of grief, or the 6 months of lawyers, or the sight of my son throwing his wife to the wolves to save himself. He said he was sorry. I was glad he was working. I hoped he meant it. I hoped for his sake that he would build a life, but it wasn't my life. Not anymore. I stood up. My coffee was cold. I dumped it in the sink and grabbed my keys. I spent the afternoon where I spent most of my afternoons, at the community center in the woodshop. The Sawdust Brigade, we called ourselves. It was a big, airy room that smelled like pine and cedar and machine oil. It was the best smell in the world. It was the smell of my entire life before everything. I was working on a small wooden dump truck, sanding the edges smooth, making sure no little fingers could get a splinter. My hands, which had been so steady on the phone, were just as steady on the wood. This felt real. This felt honest. "You're in a good mood, Ben," a voice rumbled next to me. It was Frank. He was 82, a retired Navy engineer, and he was in charge of the wheels. "You're smiling. You haven't smiled like that all week." I paused my sanding. "I guess I'm not Frank. I was just thinking." "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" he asked, not looking up from the tiny axle he was drilling. "Just thoughts," I said. "About how things turn out. How you can think you know someone, and then you find out you never knew them at all." Frank grunted. "Usually that's what we say about our kids, or our spouses." "Both," I said. Frank finally stopped his drill. He looked at me over his safety glasses. "Yeah, that's a rough hand. But you're still here, Ben. You're still making the toys." He tapped the wooden truck in my hands. "You're still building. That's all that matters. The rest is just noise." He was right. I went back to sanding. The smooth, repetitive motion. The creation of something. It was the opposite of the destruction I had witnessed in my own home. This was healing. I finished the truck. I set it on the shelf with the others, a little red boat, a yellow airplane, all waiting to go to the hospital. I was packing up my tools, wiping the sawdust off my arms, when the center's manager, a young woman named Maria, came into the shop. "Mr. Carter," she said, "a letter came for you. From your lawyer, it looks like." I froze. A letter from Russo. Why, the case was over. The house was sold. The money was transferred. I took the envelope from her. It was his official letterhead. My heart started that old familiar heavy beat. What now? I sat on a stool in the corner of the shop, the smell of cedar all around me. I tore open the envelope. It wasn't about my accounts. It wasn't about Adam. It was about her. It was a formal notification. Megan from prison was filing a motion for a reduced sentence, an appeal. And her lawyer was basing it on coercive control. She was claiming that Adam was the mastermind, that his gambling debts, his connections to the loan shark, had put her in mortal fear for her life, that he had forced her to embezzle the money, that he had forced her to trick me. She was painting herself as a victim coerced by a desperate, dangerous husband. And then, at the bottom of Russo's letter, was the real reason he'd written. "Her attorney Ben is requesting a statement from you. They want you to write a letter to the parole board, confirming that you believe Adam's addiction and desperation were the primary cause, and that you have forgiven her." Forgiven her. I read the word. Forgiven. She wanted my help. She wanted me to back up her story. The woman who had packed my life into Goodwill boxes. The woman who had shrieked, "Why couldn't you just die?" I looked at the letter. I thought about Carol. I thought about the golden sunset van pulling up to my curb. I thought about Adam's phone call about his calloused hands. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel anger. I just felt tired. I stood up. I walked across the woodshop past Frank, who was busy painting a set of wheels. I walked to the big metal trash can in the corner, the one filled with sawdust and wood scraps. I held the letter over the opening, and I let it go. I watched it flutter down onto a pile of pine shavings. I was done. I was finally truly done. I went back to my workbench, picked up a fresh block of wood, and started on the next toy. The lesson I learned, the one I had to pay for with my own family, it's a hard one. Sometimes the people you love the most, the ones you sacrificed your whole life to protect and build a future for, are the very ones willing to throw you away the second they think you're no longer valuable. They looked at me, and all they saw was a clueless old man. A man lost in grief, someone useless. They made one critical mistake. They forgot that age brings wisdom. They forgot that grief does not equal stupidity. And they forgot that this old man was the one who built everything they were trying to steal. The biggest lesson I want to share with you is this: always trust your gut. If something feels wrong in your own home, if someone's words don't match their actions, never ignore it. You have a right to protect yourself. Setting boundaries even with your own children, your own spouse, that isn't being cruel. That is self-respect. Don't you ever let your kindness be mistaken for weakness. Sometimes the toughest action, like calling a lawyer, like exposing the truth, is the absolute kindest thing you can do for yourself. They thought they had buried me, but they forgot. I was the one who taught them how to hold a hammer. If my story touched your heart, let me know by hitting that like button. And you, what city are you watching this story from? What time is it where you are? Subscribe to this channel right now so you don't miss the next life stories. I'll be telling with all my heart. And let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt taken for granted or used by your own family? Do you believe that sometimes tough love is the only way to protect yourself? I'm looking forward to reading every one of your comments. Thank you for listening.